Today, we're diving into a belief system where faith isn't just a feeling, and words aren't just, well, words. In this world, they are real, powerful forces in an unseen conflict that's believed to shape everything around us. I mean, really think about that. What if every single thing you said out loud could actually create change, not just in your own life, but in a spiritual dimension just beyond what we can see? For a lot of people, this isn't some fantasy question. It's their daily reality. We're going to take a look inside a framework where scripture is seen as an arsenal of weapons, and prayer, well, that's the battle cry used to fight in a constant, unseen spiritual war. To really get our heads around this, we're looking at it from two angles. On one hand, we've got the blueprint. Think of it as a spiritual training manual that lays out all the tools and rules. And on the other hand, we're stepping right onto the battleground, a live prayer session where we can see these ideas in action. But before we get into the weapons, we first have to understand the battlefield itself. Like, what is this fight all about? And who or what is the enemy? Right off the bat, a foundational piece of scripture makes one thing crystal clear. This struggle isn't with other people. It's framed as a conflict against these non-physical, malevolent forces and power structures that exist in a spiritual realm. And one of the most specific ideas we see put into practice is this concept of altars. Now, don't just picture something made of stone. In this context, they're described as these points of spiritual transaction, almost like invisible contracts, where negative agreements are made that can actually influence and control a person's life from that unseen world. So the enemy isn't some vague concept. It's defined in really specific terms. You've got rulers of darkness, spiritual hosts of wickedness, and these foundational altars or demonic agreements that are believed to hold sway, sometimes even through generations. Okay, so if that's the battle, what are you supposed to fight with? Well, the main tool, according to our blueprint, is the Word. And that means Scripture. But it's not just seen as a book, it's seen as a living, powerful weapon. And this is where it gets really interesting, because this weapon is incredibly versatile. Scripture is seen as a sword used to pierce and cut things apart. It's a fire that burns and destroys negative influences. It's a hammer for smashing down spiritual strongholds. And it's also medicine for healing and bringing things back to life. Every metaphor has a totally different job. All right, so that's the theory, the how-to guide. Now let's jump onto that battleground and see how these weapons are actually used in the middle of a prayer session. Listen to the language here. This isn't someone just asking nicely. The prayer kicks off with a powerful, active declaration. I use. See, that's the language of someone who believes they are holding a tool and invoking a specific authority to get something done. And it just keeps going with this whole series of strong, commanding words. The goal is to bind up hostile forces, paralyze their influence, destroy their power, and undo whatever they've done. This is active, boots-on-the-ground spiritual conflict. And this just shows you how incredibly specific these battle cries can be. The prayer isn't just targeting some general evil, it's aimed at specific ancestral altars and even physical things believed to be spiritual connection points, commanding the fire of God to deal with them. So here's the bottom line. In this practice, words are actions, plain and simple. Every single declaration is a command being issued into the spiritual world, and it's believed to have an immediate, real-time effect. So this probably has you wondering, okay, but what gives someone the right to issue these kinds of commands? Where does all this authority actually come from? Well, the answer, according to the source material, is all about a believer's core identity. This authority is built on declaring these powerful truths from Scripture. It starts by establishing a position of absolute victory. It is written, I am more than a conqueror. Then, it's about declaring a state of spiritual safety and security. It is written, I am far from oppression and fear does not come near me. After that, it defines a position of dominance and being in charge. It is written, I am the head and not the tail. I am above only and not beneath. And finally, it's a declaration of freedom from all these negative forces. So you see, this whole identity as a protected conqueror who has been set free, that is the very foundation for the authority to fight in this spiritual war. So let's zoom out for a second. How does this all fit together? Well, what it creates is a really direct framework for taking on life's problems with very specific spiritual solutions. Look at how this is laid out. It's a problem-solution model. If you're dealing with fear, there's a specific scripture you declare for power and a sound mind. If it's sickness, there's a claimed authority to heal. For spiritual strongholds, a weapon to tear them down. For curses, a promise of total protection. It's a highly structured, direct action way of facing challenges. So ultimately, what we're looking at here is a worldview that gives people a real sense of agency when things get tough. It gives them a clearly identified enemy, a whole arsenal of powerful spiritual tools, and a very clear purpose in how they face the difficulties of life. And that kind of leaves us all with a bigger question to think about, no matter what we believe. How much does the language we use, whether that's prayer or affirmations, or even just the way we talk to ourselves, how much does that actively shape the reality we see and experience every single day?